Why So Cold contains content that is graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised. Why So Cold relies largely on police or news documents, eyewitness accounts, press conferences, and interviews. Every episode of Why So Cold is produced with respect to the victims, families, and communities involved.
From Watts Creative Studios, this is Why So Cold.
Still to this day, wherever I am, it doesn't matter if I ever see a black truck and it has that green, like kind of like a lightning flash thing or stripe on the side, I get freaked out and I check the guy. I can't help it. It's like a reflex. It still affects you because you know there's a family out there that has not had closure to this case, and you know that person is still out there, and you wonder, are they doing this somewhere else? Or if they're still around here, why aren't they still doing it? What stopped them? I still think about it, so that tells you something. You would think at some point it would slip up and his photo would be out there, or his DNA would show up, or something. With as high tech as things are now, you would think something would give. So we're still all waiting for that day when something matches up. So I guess you find yourself looking around all the time to see if you can see him in a crowd or in cars next to you or whatever.
Around 7:30 a.m. on Saturday, March 2nd, 1996, Alicia Showalter Reynolds drove more than 150 miles to spend the day shopping with her mother Sadie in Charlottesville, Virginia. She even left early, and she planned to meet her mother at the mall at 10:30 a.m. However, she never arrived. When she didn't arrive, her mother called Mark, Alicia's husband. He said she could have been delayed due to weather possibly. So Sadie waited several more hours, but eventually left. At around 6 p.m., 50 miles away, Alicia's car was found along a highway near Culpeper, Virginia. A napkin was on the windshield indicating that she had had car trouble, though an inspection after determined that nothing was wrong with it. The next day, police set up a roadblock and talked to witnesses who said they saw Alicia along Route 29 talking to a man with a blue pickup on the side of the road. Police later found out that at least 20 women came forward claiming that while driving along Route 29, an unidentified man had tried to get them to pull over. He would get their attention by honking his horn, flashing his lights, and yelling at them, saying that there was something wrong with their car. Some of them pulled over, and he took them to a payphone without incident. Others claimed that when they ignored him, he became furious and later drove away.
Between the years of 1996 and 2014, an unusually high number of women have fallen victim to disappearances and murders along the Route 29 corridor in Virginia. Witnesses came forward with stories of a man urging women to pull over to the side of the road, stating car trouble. This man would call himself Larry Breeden and earn the title the Route 29 Stalker. The first reported case of the Route 29 Stalker's reign of terror began in March 1996. Detectives have received more than 10,000 leads in this case, and to this day, no one has ever been convicted for her murder.
One week before Alicia's disappearance, a woman told police that she was driving home when a man approached her. He claimed that there were problems with her car and offered her a ride, which she accepted. A few minutes later, he began attacking her, but she was able to escape his truck, breaking her ankle in the process. Police now believe that he was a serial killer, perfecting his future attacks on women, and was most likely the same one that Alicia encountered.
It was raining and cold when Carmelita Shomo headed south on Route 234, the night of February 23rd, 1996. She was driving home to Quantico. She then noticed flashing lights in her rear-view mirror. This account of what followed is taken from her March 5th, 1996 interview with the FBI special agent. Shomo pulled onto the shoulder, and the man parked behind her. As he approached, she thought he might be a friend of her husband and rolled down her window and asked, "Do I know you?" But he was a stranger and said he had seen sparks under her car, perhaps from a loose bolt or the CV joints going bad. He said it wouldn't be safe for her to drive because the brakes might give out. Then he offered to drive her home, and she accepted. He suggested that she hang something from a window of her car to identify it as having broken down. She hung a rag, locked up, and climbed into the truck. The man drove her approximately 3 miles down 234, which in 1996 was 2 lanes instead of 4, through an area that was less populated than it is now. 3 times, the man said that headlights from the cars behind him were causing glare on his windshield and pulled over until the vehicle had passed. They talked as they headed south in the rain. The man asked her to show him where she lived. She asked his name, and he said it was Larry. He wanted to know how'd she get her car home, and she replied that her husband could tow it himself. Then he asked whether it was an automatic or stick shift, and when she said it was an automatic, he suggested that they go back. He would drive her car, and she could drive his truck to her residence. By this time, she was getting uneasy and asked him to drop her off at an all-night gas station near the intersection of 234 and the Montclair subdivision. Instead, he pulled over for a 4th time and, again, complaining about glare in the windshield, which she couldn't see, asked her to hand him a tissue from the pocket of the passenger side door. Then, he attacked. Grabbing her neck, he shoved her head towards his lap. In his right hand, Shomo stated he had held a screwdriver pointing at her neck. He told her to shut up and put your head down in my lap. But she fought back, elbowing him in the chest as they struggled. Somehow, the passenger door came open. Shomo later stated she thought the man must have opened it, because by then, he was yelling at her to get out of the truck. As she slid toward the door, they both grabbed for her purse and she fell out of the truck, with the purse left behind and one foot tangled in the seatbelt as he pulled back onto the road. She was briefly dragged before she could wrestle her foot free, breaking her ankle in the process. Shomo told investigators that cars had passed her on the side of the road as she screamed for help, but no one stopped. Finally, an off-duty ranger for nearby Prince William Forest Park and his wife, whose house faces Route 234, heard her and came out. The ranger used his police radio to call for help. Beginning 2 days later, on February 26th, there were 5 more stops before March 2nd, when Alicia was abducted. 1 on Monday, 2 on Wednesday, 1 on either Monday or Wednesday, and 1 on Thursday. The frequency suggests that by Saturday, March 2nd, 1996, the man was determined to find a victim. At about 10:15 a.m., he attempted to stop a woman heading north on the other side of 29 from where he would soon stop Alicia. Shortly after that, heading south on 29, a man in a truck stopped Alicia.
My fiance and I lived in a house on the side of Route 29, right outside of Culpeper, Virginia, in the Riva area. And I was on my way home from work one day, and it was, in the evening, maybe around between 6 and 7 o'clock. It was warm out. I believe it was somewhere in the summertime, because it's still light out. And as I was driving down 29, I was approached by a guy in a black Nissan truck, which pulled up beside me and kept pointing and to roll down my window. So I rolled down my window, and he told me that I had sparks coming out of my tailgate. And I said, okay, thank you. And he just looked at me like, well, aren't you going to pull over? And so I told him, I just live over here. I'll figure it out. And he was like, oh, okay. And I rolled up my window and I continued on. And as I was turning to make a left-hand turn to go into the northbound lane, which was the side my house was on, as he passed me, I remember thinking to myself, what if this guy tried to abduct me? And then I remember seeing 30-day tags on the back of his truck. And the truck was shiny clean, like it was brand new. And thinking to myself, would sound silly, that, oh, well, he wouldn't get far. He has 30-day tags. At this time, I was 23. And I remember looking, and there were the 30-day tags that had the red writing. And so I pulled into my house, and my husband and a friend of his, which I can't remember who the friend was standing in the front yard. And I got out of the truck, and I told my fiance to please check my truck. This guy just told me there were sparks coming out of my tailpipe. So they checked the truck over good, and they said there was nothing wrong with it. Well, what I believe to be the next day, I was sitting, it was in the morning, I was sitting in my living room watching television, and I had a big bay window, which I could see all the traffic on 29. And I saw this truck, which was a black Nissan, and it had a teal stripe, and it was shiny, squeaky clean, going really slow down the southbound lane in front of my house. And then a few minutes later, I saw them going really slow in front of my house in the northbound lane. And they did a loop and came back around, and then they pulled into my driveway. So I knew that my fiance at the time, his cousin had a little black Nissan, which wasn't that clean, shiny, and nice. I thought maybe he did some work to it, and that's why it looked, different. So I ran to the, back to get dressed and freshen up before they came to knock on the door, and several minutes went by, and I looked out my window, and they were sitting in the driveway. And I waited a couple more, like a minute or two, and they never knocked on the door, so I went out to go out the door, and they were backing out of my driveway. And, of course, later on, I realized that was the same exact truck that tried to pull me over on 29, saying that I had sparks coming out of my tailpipe. Well, moving on to 3 years later, it was either late 95 or early 96 that I had to take my son, my newborn, to the doctor in Fredericksburg. So on the way back, we stopped at the 7-Eleven on Route 3 and 20, and I got gas, and I was going inside to pay for the gas, and I realized that there was a little black Nissan sitting over by the phone booth, and the guy kept staring at me. And he stared at me when I went in, and he stared at me when I came out, which I thought was kind of creepy and odd. So when I got in the truck, I remember telling my sister, ooh, that guy's like staring at me. It's weird. So we never thought of it again, and we were driving home, and which we were like probably 30, 35 miles from my house. And when we turned down Norman Road and we got towards the end of Norman Road, I remember my sister saying, Paula, Alan's behind you flashing the lights on and off. He wants you to pull over. You need to pull over. And which Alan was actually my husband at the time. And I looked in the side view mirror, and quickly I realized it wasn't my husband's truck because the front end was different. And I told her, no, that's not Alan. She's like, yes, it's Alan. That's him and his Nissan. And I said, no, that's not his truck. The grill, the front is different. And then I remember her turning around looking and staring at him. And she's like, well, he got really mad. I guess he was maybe pounding his fist or whatever. He got mad, I guess, that we didn't pull over, or that he didn't realize there was someone else in the truck with me, and he had followed me all that way. And so he turned around in the Heyday Farm driveway and then turned and went back the other way, in the other direction.
Well, when we heard on the news that she was missing, everybody was kind of on edge. And then eventually, I don't remember how long it was afterwards, they had found her body, and it was not far from where we lived. So we were commuting up Route 3. We were heading, into town a lot, and so we would drive right by the site where her body had been found. So we had 2 young girls at the time, and we were all scared to death. I think everybody was on edge. Everybody I knew was on edge. The sketch was out there. Everybody knew somebody who looked like that sketch. So it was the Monday after the weekend where she went missing, and the sketch was out, if I remember all the timeline correctly. And I was working at a clinic, and we had student nurses come through all the time, and I believe they came from Germanna, so I assume this guy came from Germanna. So there was a guy who came to the clinic that Monday morning, and he walked in, and we were like, holy crap, look at that guy. We were all scared to death of him because he looked so much like the drawing. So this was in Orange County. So we were just kind of observing him and all. He was the kind of guy who, like, when you talk to him, he didn't really look at you, and he was just very distant and removed and creepy. And he also had wounds on the side of his face, on one side of his face, yeah. And if I remember correctly, it was the left side of his face. And he just seemed really shifty. And so we always were suspicious that might be him. We called the police because he looked so much like the drawing. And they sent a plainclothes guy over, and he actually went through the clinic, and we weighed him and measured him, and, that kind of stuff. And he checked him out, and then I don't know what happened after that with it.
The town of Culpeper has changed so much since I've been here. When I first came here, I was like, I grew up in Illinois, so we had the best restaurants and all that. There was nothing in Culpeper. I felt there's a couple of restaurants now. It's really grown. We have a lot more diversity though. There's a lot of transfers. So I think from 2005 to where we are now, it is 2005 was really good old boy network. I couldn't imagine 1996. When all these murders happened was probably this town, like I said though, now I feel safe. I just say that because it's really changed a lot. Now my parents came and saw me when I lived here 2008, and they're like, you live in the hood, and I'm like, are you kidding me? And that because we didn't have these businesses and all that, and supposedly downtown was kind of a rough area. I think the killer's still out there, to tell you the truth. So anyway, when I became a realtor though, a lot of people always go, I get this all the time too. How do I become a real estate agent? It looks like you're having so much fun. Because I never post any of the bad stuff. I'll be honest with you. My second house I ever sold was a cold case murder. It was, didn't know it because in the state of Virginia, you don't have to disclose it. I took my son in, and my son breaks out in the hives. And I'm like, what is going on in this house? And 2 weeks before closing, I find out a monk was murdered in this house. What if he strikes again? I think that's where, and a lot of times people don't think that they'll get caught, but I was telling you I studied it in college, and they say they usually never stop. There's always that drive to keep killing. So that's what serial killers do. Will they do it again? I don't know. Was it just one person, or was there more?
So it's still, to this day, it's still brought up every day. And what is the, I don't know a good way to word it, but what is the pulse or the vibe about it? That he's still in the area, that he's moved on, or what's the general gossip about that name, the nickname?
I get from the people and these are people that have lived, that were raised here, that I hear he's still here. They clearly know who it is. No one will do anything about it. And my biggest thing is it because no one's if they know about it, then why isn't he?
I started going to high school in Orange in 2000, what was it? 2006, and that's where I met my buddy Steven, and he used to take me hunting with him because I didn't really have any spots out here at the time, so he took me with him and went down to their hunt club, and we've been there a few times, and he never mentioned anything about it. And one night I was sitting in his spot, and I shot a deer, and so we had to go in the woods and track it. Yeah. And so we were walking in the woods in the middle of the night, and he was kind of just looked up at me. He was like, man, I don't think I ever told you, but there was a woman found right here where we're at, dead, like in a bag, bagged up or whatever. And I was like, what are you talking about, man? He's like, yeah, way back in the day, there was a FedEx driver driving down the road, and he said he didn't know whether he saw buzzards flying in the air, and so he called it in, or if he had to go to the bathroom, so he stopped, walked in the woods to go to the bathroom real quick, and just stumbled across it. But he said there was a woman found dead in the woods right there, and it kind of freaked me out, but I don't know, I didn't really think much of it back then, you know what I mean? Like, my sister's boyfriend was on a Facebook group for different podcasts and stuff, and he said that you joined it and offered everybody to listen to yours. And so he started listening to it. Then he told my brother about it. And then I was heading home from work one day and got to talking. I was like, yeah, man, I finished all of my podcasts. So have you heard any more? He was like, yeah, Jeff told me about one. It's called the 29 Stalker. I was like, what? He said, yeah, it's called the Route 29 Stalker. Right there where you live at. And he just got to tell me about it, about the whole story, and then he was like, there's a woman found in Lignum. I was like, that's weird, because I hunt a piece of property over there in Lignum, and my buddy told me there was a woman found in the woods, and some FedEx driver or something saw a buzzard flying around and called it in, and that's how they found her. And he was like, man, that's the same freaking story. That's the same thing. So I was just like, holy crap. I had no idea there was a whole story behind it. Like, multiple cases of missing women, and it just, I don't know, kind of really freaked me out then, It's just like, holy crap, man, this is right here where I live. And the funny thing is, it's like, I never heard about it. My stepdad, he's been living in Orange, right here down the road, since the late 90s, and never heard him say anything about it. And even when he told me, I didn't think to ask, like, any more questions about it. But it's just weird that people don't really, I don't know, talk much about it, but I guess being 20 years ago,
We have new information tonight on an 18-year-old unsolved homicide in Virginia. Alicia Reynolds was found murdered in rural Culpeper as police were investigating a series of attempted abductions by a man known as the Route 29 Stalker.
Police won't say how Reynolds died, and they're not giving specifics on DNA or other evidence. Investigators have issued this sketch, but say this 1996 rendering is likely dated.
I begin every day with this case.
Brilliant and beautiful Johns Hopkins University grad student disappeared on Route 29 near Culpeper, Virginia. State police found her body 2 months later, but they've never found her killer. Bruce LeShan talked today with her heartbroken parents. Bruce?
Yeah, Leslie, they called the killer the Route 29 Stalker. 2 decades, 10,189 leads, and Virginia State Police say they are still looking for the man who tried to stop 20 or more women along the highway and ultimately kidnapped and murdered Alicia Showalter Reynolds.
Alicia was this very, I don't know if I can,
the 21st anniversary of her daughter's murder.
talented, kind, gentle soul.
Sadie Showalter says this is an especially painful time of year for her family.
Her twin brother and her younger sister, and also uncles and aunts and cousins that all loved her and are missing her today.
Alicia was 25, driving to Charlottesville from graduate school in Baltimore.
Here's our phone number. If anyone sees anything about that, we'd really appreciate a call. Okay.
State police suspect her killer flagged her down with a ruse, that there were sparks flying out from under her car.
Let her go. We want her back.
20 or more women came forward and described a white guy about 6 feet tall who tried the same trick on them. 2 months after Alicia disappeared, a local spotted vultures and found her body in a desolate field.
Possibility is that there is yet an unidentified suspect.
The family is desperate enough for answers to plead directly with their daughter's killer.
My message would be, why hide? You've been hidden long enough.
She's missed greatly.
What you've heard in this episode of Why So Cold were interviews from another podcast we did several years ago called the Route 29 Stalker. That was actually our very first podcast. I picked up a microphone, got in the car with my wife, and traveled to Culpeper, Virginia every other weekend and interviewed people. And as you heard in some of those interviews, we were sitting in their living room just talking about this case and what it meant to them back then and now. We were even in the truck with Jacob, going to his hunting grounds, talking about what he had heard in high school. I'm not an investigator. I wasn't then, and I'm not now. So that podcast experience taught me a lot. It taught me not to speculate, not to put out a whole lot of theories and what I thought would have happened in this and that. Since then, I've learned to just tell the story, give the facts that are known, and let people that may know something call with information. During that podcast, I learned it's not really about the podcast. It's about the victim. Keeping their story alive is what's most important. And that's why I decided to revisit it in Why So Cold and just tell the story that I have found through other people in interviewing and take out all the speculation, all of my personal theories, and just give you the story in maybe a different format that's easier to listen to, that may jog a memory, just like doing that podcast did several years ago. After releasing the Route 29 Stalker podcast several years ago, we continue to get emails every week regarding the case, especially from victims that the stalker attempted to pull over himself. That in itself is why I wanted to continue with Why So Cold. What's so interesting about this Route 29 Stalker case is that Alicia Showalter Reynolds wasn't the only body found in Lignum that year. There were actually 2 other bodies found that summer and fall of the same year in the same area that Alicia's body was found. However, there's so little on those cases that I really wasn't able to dive deep into them in the other podcast, or even in Why So Cold. Of course, there are theories and you can speculate, but that's not my focus with Why So Cold. I just want to keep these stories alive for the victims, for the families, and for the communities. This has been an episode of Why So Cold. For the source material that was used in this episode, please visit the show notes or whysocold.com.